For tuning in. Let's take a look at our leading story. Well, the ANC says that it will pay back the costs incurred to fly the party's delegation, led by Secretary-General Ace Magashule, to meet with ZANU-PF leaders in Zimbabwe. This follows pressure from civil society and political parties, including the EFF, DA, and FF+. Last week, Magashule led the ANC delegation to Zimbabwe, but used an Air Force plane, which was en route to the neighboring country, used by Defense Minister Mapisa-Nqakula. President Cyril Ramaphosa has since ordered Mapisa-Nqakula to explain the circumstances that led to the taxpayers' money being misused in the manner that it was, but Ramaphosa is yet to respond to that report. All right, for more than, let's talk to Economic Freedom Front's head of intentions, Godric Gadi. All right, thank you very much for joining us. A warm welcome to its EFF, pardon me. All right, what do you make of the ANC now saying that they will indeed pay back the costs?
Well, good afternoon, my sister, and good afternoon to South Africa. The economic freedom fighters note the decision of the ANC to repay. We think it is in line with the comments and the remarks made by the Commander-in-Chief and President of the economic freedom fighters yesterday in Rugby, that it was a necessary decision to go to intervene in Zimbabwe. After all, the crisis of Zimbabwe is the crisis of Africa. And as a ruling party, we cannot condemn them for going to intervene in Zimbabwe and assist the people of Zimbabwe to achieve a lasting peace. However, we do condemn the abuse of state resources, and it is the right decision to pay, and they have paid. We need to move on and make sure that we do actually get returns for the intervention in Zimbabwe.
All right. Without the pressure of yourselves as the EFF and other political parties, and I will be speaking to FF Plus as well in a short while, without the pressure of all these parties, the DA as well, saying that, this shouldn't have happened, do you think that the ANC would have indeed said, all right, we'll pay back the money, or would it have been just another matter that was sort of overlooked? Do you believe that you, as opposition parties, putting pressure is what led to the ANC now coming out saying that they will pay back with costs?
Well, the ruling party is known to be a party led by people whom their national conscience has evaporated and has left them, and their conscience cannot even speak to them. They had to wait for the wisdom of the economic freedom fighters in particular to just say to them, look, cost the bill of the salary of the pilot, the cost of service fuel, the flying cost, what could have been the cost in the open market for a charter flight to Zimbabwe in and out, and for those hours, pay, let's move on. You just have to pay. We have from time to time to assist the ruling party to know that it cannot blur the lines between party and state.
All right. Well, all right. We're going to talk to the ANC shortly in a while as well. But talk to us about how you put forward, your initial qualms about what had happened. I mean, you talked to me about the fact that you're happy with the ANC going to go assist, to go and help in Zimbabwe. But really the initial qualms, because the ANC could come and say, look, we were saving costs. That flight was en route to Zimbabwe in any case. Talk to us about how you put forward your issue, your initial issue with this flight.
Well, the message that we have always from time to time sent to the people of Zimbabwe and its government is that they need to find each other. They must respect the human rights in Zimbabwe. There must be a democratic dispensation in Zimbabwe, because that fallacy of the palace coup in Zimbabwe that actually removed President Mugabe is coming to haunt us, as we can see what is happening in Mali and other countries in Africa whereby there are military coups, because we have not condemned military coups enough to actually put a stop in it, as it would have happened in Zimbabwe, so it's happening in the rest of Africa. We need to condemn the human rights abuse profusely throughout Africa, and in particular in Zimbabwe. And we shall continue to be very consistent in calling for the stepping down of President Mnangagwa for all the human rights abuses, and actually in particular for reneging on the decision of the people of Zimbabwe to own their land, instead redistributing the land back to the white settlers of the British descendants in Zimbabwe.
All right, well, it's no secret then, Godrich, I'm sure, that the EFF was quite a supporter of the late former president of Zimbabwe. Apart from wanting the stepping down of the current president, Mnangagwa, where does the EFF really stand on all of this? Last week I was having a conversation with my colleague, Sophie Mukwena, and one of the things that she raised was the fact that Zimbabwe was saying there is no crisis in Zimbabwe. However, there's a Zimbabwean crisis in South Africa. And you would know that South Africans have been called xenophobic and all sorts of things for saying these kinds of things. But I'd like to know where exactly the EFF actually stands on the issue of Zimbabwe. Is there a Zimbabwean crisis in South Africa?
We do not believe there is any Zimbabwean crisis in South Africa. If there is any crisis, the crisis in Zimbabwe. In South Africa, there is a crisis of the ruling party with its bureaucracy and cannot manage its issues, in particular the Home Affairs issues in South Africa, the Department of Home Affairs. All they need to do is to document every other person who is in South Africa, like all other South Africans, and ensure that there is a rule of law, and not what we see wherein there are long queues everywhere throughout South Africa in what is called the refugee receiving centers. Yeah. That is the crisis wherein our bureaucracy is not competent enough to document every other person who is in South Africa. That is the nature of the crisis, and not the people of Zimbabwe.
All right, Godrich, a pleasure speaking to you as always. Thank you for giving us your time here on SABC News, sir.
Thank you.
All right, that's Godrich Gaji, the head of international relations at EFF, not FF+. We were, in fact, supposed to have a conversation with the FF+. For more reaction, then, we are now joined, indeed, then, by Peter Groenewald, leader of the FF+. A very good afternoon to you, sir. Thank you so very much for joining us here on SABC News.
Good afternoon.
Sir, do you stand where the EFF stands on this matter with relations to this flight that was taken to Zimbabwe? What was your initial objection? I assume all the sort of opposition parties kind of got together and gave a similar sort of reaction to that flight that went to Zimbabwe. But tell us exactly what your stance was on the issue as the FF+.
Well, firstly, we had two issues on the matter. Firstly, we said that it was the misuse of government, and in this specific case, South African National Defence Force equipment for own party political gain, which is totally unacceptable. And secondly, I also said that they have violated the regulations of the lockdown. Now, firstly, we have the arguments about the misuse of the Defence Forces plane, and that said that they will pay back the money now. The fact of the matter is, firstly, I would like to have a specified receipt to see exactly what the costs were. I already asked a question in Parliament, and I submitted it to Parliament to the Minister for Defence, where I want a clear, detailed analysis of the cost to ensure that they pay it back. We also want to know who paid for the hotels and everything, and the venues. So I'd first like to see that before I will be satisfied. But the fact of the matter is, by now saying that they will pay back the cost, they admit that they were on the wrongdoing, and I don't tell them, nobody must tell me that they didn't know it from the start.
All right, so if you see this then as an admission of guilt, what now? What will the FF Plus do about that? And the fact that the ANC is saying that, look, we'll pay back that money, but it seems that you want more repercussions given the fact that you're seeing this. And certainly it is really an admission of some sort of guilt, isn't it?
Yes, of course it's an admission of guilt, but as I said, we want to have a specific all the specifics and all the costs in detail before we will be satisfied. So that is as far as the costs are concerned when we talk about the misuse of the plate. But I also asked a question in Parliament to the Minister of Home Affairs because in terms of the Level 2 regulations, anybody who leaves the country over an international border must have prior admission from the Minister for Home Affairs to leave the country. And there are specific cases where permission will be given by the Minister of Home Affairs. And when I look at the criteria of those regulations, not one of the criteria were complied by the delegation from the ANC. So I want to know on what basis that the Minister of Home Affairs gave permission to the delegation of the ANC to go over an international border, because not all of them are members of Parliament, but besides that, they cannot say that they are essential workers for some other category. Yes, members of Parliament are essential workers, but not to just go and promote party political relations over international borders. So we wait for the answer of the Minister of Home Affairs to see and hear on what basis that permission was given, if it was given before the time.
And out of fairness, I mean, I did ask the FF Plus representative Godrich Gadi where he stands then on the EFF representative Godrich Gadi about where he stands, or where the EFF rather stands on the issue of Zimbabwe. You know, last week there was conversation, and of course this obviously is what led that ANC delegation to go to Zimbabwe. There was conversation about, you know, the fact that there seems to be a Zimbabwean crisis in South Africa, even though the Zimbabwean government is saying there's no crisis at all in Zimbabwe itself. Where does FF Plus actually stand on the issue of Zimbabwe and the fact that there was perhaps this need for the ANC to travel to Zimbabwe?
Well, firstly, I just want to say Gadi is not from the FF Plus.
I did correct myself,
don't get confused.
Sir. I did.
I understand. Don't get confused with EFF and the FF Plus. But no, firstly, we agree that Zimbabwe as a neighbor country is important to South Africa. But to use that as an excuse to send off a party political delegation is not acceptable. That's why the minister are there. That's why the SADC country and region is there. So that is official business, and we're not talking about that. This was purely a party political issue to enhance the policy and the relations between two party or political parties. And we say, if that was so important, they could have used a webinar or could have used Skype or any of the virtual platforms to have that discussion. I mean, virtual discussions are taking place all over the world now, and that would have been much cheaper in the first place. So I don't see the necessity that it was so urgent that it had to happen now. Therefore, we say it was not acceptable to the Freedom Front Plus for the delegation to go and visit Zimbabwe this time, or can I say, within the lockdown regulations and contravening and violating those regulations.
Yeah, I think you raise a good point in terms of the virtual platforms that could have indeed been used, as indeed it was party to party that we're having the conversation. But I'm not sure if, Mr. Groenewald, you answered my question. I asked where the FF Plus stands on the issue of there being a Zimbabwean crisis in South Africa. You would have known some weeks ago there were Zimbabweans that are living in South Africa, Zimbabwean nationals who were asking for some intervention with some of the issues. They were even raising Zimbabwean Lives Matter placards and so forth. And I'm asking the question again, where FF Plus stands on the issue of there being or not being a Zimbabwean crisis in South Africa, sir.
If on that specific matter, we say there is a crisis in Zimbabwe. There's no doubt as far as that is concerned. Also in South Africa, it's creating a crisis in this sense that Zimbabwean citizens are coming to South Africa. Some of them, and I think the majority of them, illegal into South Africa. That is creating its own problems within South Africa. So if you want to know our stand on the crisis in Zimbabwe, of course we say it must be solved. And we must ensure that we get a proper democracy in Zimbabwe. I am not so sure that people have the freedom of speech in Zimbabwe. And yes, if we can solve the crisis in Zimbabwe, we will have less than a crisis of Zimbabwe within South Africa. But I say again, that is no justification for the ANC delegation to go and visit their counterpart in Zimbabwe.
All right, Mr. Groenewald, Peter Groenewald of FF Plus. I will certainly ask the team not to put FF Plus and EFF back to back with each other like that. Thank you very much for your time, sir.
Welcome.
All right, let's then continue certainly on the story then to discuss this. We're now joined by on the line by ANC spokesperson Bule Mabe. A very good afternoon to you, Mr. Mabe. Thank you for joining us here on SABC News, sir.
Afternoon and afternoon to your viewers. I hope I'm audible.
You are indeed. I wonder if you heard the reaction then from EFF and FF Plus. Some of the issues that were raised, Mr. Mabe, was why was it so important to go physically to Zimbabwe, the delegation to go physically to Zimbabwe? As of course you know, we are in the middle of a pandemic. What was the reason? As of course government has been saying repeatedly that we use virtual platforms to communicate with each other. Why didn't you use your own example? Why didn't you set up a panel where you could have this sort of conversation before we even touch on the issue of the aircraft? Why was it so urgent and so necessary that it had to be face-to-face meetings, Mr. Mabe?
Well, I think that all of us here in the country know and understand why the issues of Zimbabwe are so critical to be attended to in this way by our country. Our National Executive Committee of the ANC had taken a decision previously on the need to engage with ZANU-PF. Of course, it had intended to extend those engagements to many other stakeholders in that country to deal with numerous other issues. Yeah. You'd also understand that the continued stability of Zimbabwe is important to our country and the region broadly. So we have to make sure that these engagements, well within that atmosphere, continue to be brokered in that way. The issue would have moved from numerous other engagement that the ANC shall have had with ZANU-PF in the past. So this is part of those continued engagements. We have said that where there was an issue of us having aid in the sense of using a SANDF flight, there will be reimbursement to that effect, because we do understand concerns that our people are raising. But the situation of our engagements with Zimbabwe, it's so pressing and requires that we all work together to find solutions to our common challenges.
Yeah, just a quick question. Why is it that the president, in his capacity, of course, as president of the ANC, but as a whole, as president of the country, why is it that he was not aware or didn't know that this delegation was going to be using this particular aircraft? It seems that the president was quite taken aback. Well,
Flo, I'm sure that you in the SABC have got access to people in government. You can always file questions with them. The ANC has issued a statement today that reflects on its own position, including the engagement that it shall have had with the delegation. We have appreciated the work that they have done in Zimbabwe together with ZANU-PF, and have also appreciated the fact that ZANU-PF themselves have agreed to allow us to engage with other stakeholders in that country. But also the most important thing was to also give assurance to all parties, especially because we are leading states ourselves. The ANC is leading the government of the people of South Africa. ZANU-PF is leading the government of the people of Zimbabwe. It's important that when these engagements are being done, there is always a shared understanding that we are not seeking to undermine the sovereignty of both countries. Such must always be respected at all times. So it was important to have this engagement so that later on, when there are engagements with all other parties, whether such happen on webinar or not, this understanding shall have been created with the parties.
Mr. Mabe, I'm glad you raised the example of me using facilities at the SABC without asking my boss. I certainly do my job at the behest of my boss. So I cannot use, for example, this particular facility, these cameras, without my boss having signed that off. Patiswa needs to sign somewhere that Flo is going to use this particular studio. So I find it quite disingenuous for you to say.
Statement.
Sir, I want it on air. I'd like it on air, sir, please.
You are saying?
I'm saying that I find it disingenuous for you to say that the president had no idea and that, you know, this aircraft was used without him knowing.
I didn't hear that, Flo.
Yes, sir. So I'd like you to say it on air. Why is it then that the president, I know you're saying that there was a statement, but I'd like it clearer on air. Why is it that the president was not aware of the flight that was going to be used, this particular aircraft that was used by the delegation, when this delegation was traveling at the behest of the president, is what I'm actually trying to ask you, sir.
Okay. Now, thanks for that question.
Sure.
Let me repeat myself. As you know, I don't speak on behalf of government. I am reiterating the statement of the ANC as the national spokesperson of the ANC.
The leader of the ANC
actually,
is President Cyril Ramaphosa.
Just to read from our own statement, that it is our quest to achieve this mission. We traveled in an unusual manner and profusely humble ourselves where we went wrong during the lockdown, and will reimburse the government for the cost incurred on behalf of our delegation. Our delegation is under quarantine in line with our lockdown regulations. This statement now should begin to show the responsibility through which we are communicating, even our travel to that country, to go and try and broker and deal with some of the issues and common challenges which we believe requires the attention of both parties.
Yeah. Mr. Babi, what do you respond when other political parties, opposition parties, are saying that by saying that you will be paying back this money, that this is an admission of guilt? And I did pose the question to the EFF if they believe that if there wasn't pressure put on the ANC about this issue, that the ANC would have kind of let it go. Do you think that that's the case? Would you have kind of let it go had other political parties not raised issue with this particular flight going to Zimbabwe? And is this an admission of guilt? So those two questions essentially.
Well, I mean, we will leave opposition parties to do what they are doing. They are in the opposition. They are politicking in that way. But the ANC was not under pressure. The president of the country had asked for a report from the Minister of Defense within 48 hours.
Yeah.
And well within that, the Treasurer General of the African National Congress was on your platform on Sunday and did confirm that officials will be meeting yesterday, where they did indeed meet, receive a report. Upon receiving a report, officials of the ANC took this kind of a decision, which we are now coming out to communicate. So there was certainly no pressure on the side of the African National Congress to react in the manner that it is doing. We are a responsible party. We always humble ourselves before our people. Where we have erred, we are the first to say we admit this error and will be able to deal with it in this way. There are very few political parties in this country that have got the capacity to acknowledge and admit their own mistakes.
Yeah. Just in closing, Mr. Mabe, you know, you yourselves have said that, this was really party-to-party talks between you as the ANC and ZANU-PF. And I just wonder, in that whole delegation that was going to Zimbabwe, was there not one person who sat in that aircraft and said, actually, hold on a minute, this is a party activity. We can't really be using, state facilities. Why is it that nobody in this delegation raised some sort of issue that, so that, we don't find ourselves where we are at the moment, Mr. Mab?
Well, Flo, I acknowledge that question, but it's like taking a stick, hitting a child, and when the child says, no, but I know that I would have erred here, then you say, you hit them again, but why did you err? So I think that as responsible citizens ourselves, we all know the kind of the mission that the ANC was out to fulfill in Zimbabwe.
But let's also be fair, Mr. Mabe. The ANC has been in government for such a long time. This shouldn't be happening at this time. Can we at least admit that much, Mr. Mabe?
Yeah.
Can we at least admit the fact that the ANC has been in government for such a long time? It's an error that really shouldn't have been happening at this time, really.
Well, I think that there are pressing issues that we have to go and deal with in Zimbabwe, which all of you are aware of. Some of them, we have even tried to articulate those issues even on our own statement to make sure that we all continue in our quest to make sure that we hold on freedom of the press, we hold on to freedom of association and all of that. That's why it was important to make ZANU-PF aware that we will be coming back in the foreseeable future to engage with the opposition in that country. So it was not just going to happen that we will wake up, go to that country without not having had an engagement and ensure that there is an understanding of what we are trying to achieve here. We ought to respect the people of Zimbabwe as well.
All right, Mr. Mabe, always a pleasure. Thank you for giving me your time, sir.
No, thanks.
All right. Well, the ANC says that it will pay back the costs incurred to fly the party's delegation led by Secretary-General Ace Magashule to meet with ZANU-PF leaders in Zimbabwe. This follows pressure from civil society and political parties, including the FFDA and the FF+. All right. Let's indeed get more from the Democratic Alliance. A very good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon to your listeners.
And thanks so much for joining us then this afternoon. What do you make of the statement? I'm wondering if you heard my conversation with ANC spokesperson Mr. Pule Mabe. They're saying that, well, the party erred and, it takes a lot for a party to err and say, well, we erred and we're correcting that mistake. What is your reaction to that this afternoon?
Well, first of all, I think they were never expected that they will be caught with their hands in the cookie jar. And this is exactly what happened now. This is not the first time that this happened. I mean, the president has just the other day told the nation that he's drawing a line in the sand and that he will root out corruption and abuse of state resources. And my goodness gracious, here it happens. And there were so many contradictory stories and versions. And Mr. Dlamini from the Ministry of Defense the other day was just spinning him into a web. So it is clear that right from the beginning, the Minister of Defense, everybody was fully aware that this is abuse of state resources. Keep in mind, the minister normally uses a smaller Falcon 50 for her duties. The Falcon 900 is normally for the Deputy President and obviously in quasi the BBJ for the President. So why would she then now suddenly coincidentally using the bigger aircraft to Zimbabwe? My information is that in Zimbabwe she had a half an hour discussion with her counterpart, as if that is just to show that there was some liaison between them. That could have been done on a virtual platform, typically what the President is doing. So we just don't buy that. In Zimbabwe, she was part, and all the ministers that was there, as part of the ANC delegation and not a government delegation. There's just too many throws back and forth, and it is quite clear that this is an admission of guilt. It's an admission that we were right from the beginning. All our corroboration was proven to be correct. And we've been vindicated in this whole process. And, the President has got no option but to act now. If he wants to be taken serious as an honest and dedicated President, he must now put his foot down and he must do as he has promised the nation that he will do.
You want the President to act and do what? And just on the back of that, are you then of the assumption that the President didn't know that this flight was indeed going to Zimbabwe? So just those two questions, please, Quibus.
Yeah. On the last one, if the President, as the President of South Africa, who is in charge of the executive, was not aware of that, And remember, we have heard stories and reports over the weekend that the Minister of Defence had indeed authorization from the President to go. He is also the President of the ANC. So if he was not aware that there was an official ANC delegation going to Zimbabwe and they're taking a lift with an Uber lift with the Minister of Defence. He's also the Commander-in-Chief of the South African National Defence Force. And he's fully aware of how the budget of the Defence Force and the Air Force specifically has been cut, to the extent that the Air Force must now cut their flying hours for their own aircraft and their own pilots, in which we are compromising their accreditation to basically foot the bill for the ANC to fly. This is just totally disingenuous, and it's actually an insult for us in South Africa to think that we must believe that. We're just not buying that at all. The President has to act now. Now, what options are there for the President? Remember, this same minister in 2013-14 brought in a Burundian lady, a Burundian citizen, also unauthorized and illegal, into the country via Air Force Base Waterkloof. A couple of months ago, she acted in the Collins Khoza case, where she submitted an affidavit supporting the findings of the SANDF investigation, and then afterwards backtracked and said that she was misled by the National Defence Force leadership. Now, clearly there's a problem between her and the Defence Force going on. If they are not fully trust and there's fully confidence between them, then the President has to act in the interest of South Africa and replace her with someone that can have the support and the confidence and the faith of the leadership and the executive and the nation. Currently, we've got a major problem, and I get along with the Minister of Defence very well, but we cannot overlook what is happening now, and it's a serious compromising of our integrity and our safety and security.
So I'm going to take it as you, as the DA, as you representing the DA, saying to me on SABC News that you're indeed then calling for the head then of the Defence Minister, Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula. Can we then say that?
With the information at our disposal currently, we have got no option but to ask the President to indeed do that. Obviously, we want the report. We want the report to be made public to South Africa, and we want the report and the detail made available to the Portfolio Committee of Defence in Parliament, so that we can interrogate and have hearings on that. It is very important that action must be taken, and it must be taken now, not later.
Do you think you speak, from the same hymn book as the other political parties in opposition? And we just spoke to EFF, we spoke to FF Plus. Do you think, I can't ask you to assume what other parties think, but certainly you all came together to fight this. So I wonder if you're all kind of standing in the same place in terms of asking the President to make this call. So I am going to put that question to you as the Shadow Minister then.
Well, as a Shadow Minister of Defence since last Thursday, the DA owned this story. So the others are, with the greatest of respect, Johnny Come-Latelys. We've been consistent right from the day one and say what is happening. Our information has been corroborated. They might have jumped into the bandwagon and using the information that we have corroborated. But we have been doing the hard work and the hard hours, and we have said right from the beginning what is happening here. The President has to act now. He has promised us to act now. And unfortunately, when you are responsible and accountable for a department, or in this case, the SANDF, and you find abuses like this, it's normally the highest ranking person that must take the accountability and the rep, and in many cases must resign. In other countries, this would have happened a long time ago.
All right, Mr. Murray, let's leave it there. Cobus Murray of the DAJ, Shadow Minister of Defence. Thank you very much for your time, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, in regards to everybody.
Thanks so much. All right, President Cyril Ramaphosa is about to hold a crucial meeting with business and labour leaders at NADLAC this afternoon. The meeting is aimed at finalising the much-anticipated economic